Ethan Cooper sat quietly at the bar, nursing a rum and coke as he kept a close eye on his phone, waiting patiently for a message. Each sip of his drink pulled him deeper into reflection on the chain of events that had brought him to this point in his life. Born 36 years ago in Anchorage, Alaska, Ethan had married Rachel, his high school sweetheart, right after graduation. Not long after, he started working on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, spending weeks at a time traveling between Prudhoe Bay and Valdez, fixing problems wherever they arose. One grueling 6-week stint on the road ended with Ethan returning home to a shocking betrayal. He found Rachel in bed, not just with one of his former classmates, but two. She protested tearfully, insisting it was meaningless, just physical, but Ethan wasn't buying it. Their marriage ended in a bitter divorce. Eager to escape the pain, he enlisted in the Army, determined to leave the past behind. While stationed at Fort Bliss, Texas, Ethan met Victoria, the woman he thought would be his salvation. At first, it felt like he had struck gold. But after a year-long deployment to Iraq, he returned to yet another devastating scene. Victoria in the arms of another soldier. Once again, he filed for divorce, ending a marriage that lasted no longer than his first. Throwing himself into his work, Ethan became a soldier focused on a singular mission, eliminating the enemy. He excelled, gaining a reputation for efficiency and ruthlessness. His skills caught the attention of private organizations, and after his Army service, he was recruited as a freelancer. Over the years, Ethan became a sought-after mercenary, taking assignments across Africa, the Middle East, and even Myanmar, where he fought alongside ethnic minorities against oppressive regimes. His methods, brutal but effective, set him apart, as did his firm refusal to work for clients involved in drug trade or human trafficking. On occasion, he even accepted lower-paying contracts because he believed in the cause. Ethan's weapon of choice also distinguished him. While many preferred modern firearms, he carried a vintage Thompson submachine gun from World War II, purchased from a dubious dealer who spun an outlandish tale about its history. Supposedly, the weapon had once belonged to a mercenary in the Congo War and later to Patty Hearst. Ethan had laughed off the story, but felt an unexplainable connection to the weapon. The trench broom, as it was nicknamed, was deadly at close range and perfectly suited to his style of combat. Despite its hefty price, Ethan never regretted buying it. After a decade of relentless fighting, he grew weary of the bloodshed and returned home, determined to start anew. Transitioning into a quieter life, he became a freelance consultant for a private security firm and settled down. It was during a corporate event, where he had been hired to manage security, that he met Cassandra, an attorney from the prestigious firm Bradley and Marks. Their meeting was almost accidental. As Cassandra navigated the crowded event, she bumped into Ethan near the bar. He caught her just as she stumbled, preventing what could have been a nasty fall. For Ethan, it was a minor encounter, but Cassandra was immediately drawn to the tall, imposing man with a rugged scar etched across his face. They spent the evening talking, and from there a relationship blossomed. Ethan remained guarded, careful not to share too much about his past. He told her only that he had served in the Army before working overseas as a contractor. When she inquired about the scars on his body, he spun vague but convincing stories, never hinting at the violence of his former life or the secret bank accounts he had amassed abroad. Burned by betrayal twice before, Ethan wasn't about to let his guard down again. Despite his reservations, they fell in love and tied the knot within a year. After Ethan Cooper first met Cassandra, he truly believed he had found his soulmate. In the beginning, their relationship was everything he had dreamed of. They reveled in their physical connection several times a week, shared plenty of laughs, and managed to resolve the occasional disagreement like any other married couple. They even began discussing plans for children and purchased a beautiful 2-story, 3-bedroom home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. But as time passed, things began to unravel. Cassandra started dedicating more time to her work, burying herself in legal cases and frequently going out for drinks with her coworkers. Although Ethan noticed these changes, he tried not to dwell on them until the night of her firm's summer party. Ethan attended the event as he always did, standing by Cassandra's side as she introduced him to her colleagues. Everything seemed routine until she introduced him to the firm's newest attorney, Damian Vaughn. The moment Ethan laid eyes on him, an unsettling sense of déjà vu washed over him. He silently prayed it wasn't the same Damian Vaughn he had known years ago during his mercenary days in Africa. But as he studied the man's tall, chiseled frame and smug expression, his worst fears were confirmed. It was him, the man who had not only fought alongside Ethan, but had also betrayed him, selling out to the highest bidder and allegedly working for a federal agency. For Ethan, forgiveness was not in his nature, and he never forgot a face. Especially not the face of a man who had once tried to kill him. When Damian extended his hand in greeting, his smirk dripping with mockery, Ethan simply turned and walked away without a word. Cassandra hurried after him, clearly upset. "Ethan, sweetie, what's wrong? Why were you so rude to Damian?" There was no way Ethan could tell her the truth, not without exposing his past. "I don't trust him," he replied tersely. "Something about him feels off. I can't explain it." Cassandra crossed her arms and gave him a frustrated look. "Well, you're going to have to figure it out. Damian and I are working closely on several cases, so we'll be spending a lot of time together. Now get over it and come back to the table. You're embarrassing me." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he followed her back to the table. Before they sat down, he stopped her for a moment and said in a low voice, "Cassandra, be careful around him." "I mean it." "Don't worry, I'll be fine," she replied, brushing off his concerns. "Now, come on." Reluctantly, Ethan let her pull him back to their seats. Across the table, Damian sat with a knowing smirk, watching Ethan closely. Cassandra excused herself to speak with other colleagues, leaving the two men alone. Leaning over the table, Damian fixed Ethan with an unsettling stare. "You should know what happened in Africa was just business, nothing personal. But now that I've met Cassandra, it's personal. I intend to take her from you." Ethan's eyes narrowed, his voice cold and even. "I should have hunted you down and ended you back in Africa. I'm telling you now, if you lay a hand on my wife, I'll kill you." Damian laughed darkly. "You're still as clueless and sentimental as ever, Ethan. I've already had a taste of your wife, and before this is over, I'll make sure you watch as I take her completely. After that, I'll finish what I started with you. I bet she doesn't know about your past. Does she? Maybe I'll fill her in." Ethan's fist clenched, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I'm warning you, Damian. Let this go. Leave Cassandra out of it. You won't like how this ends." Damian's smile widened, but it was anything but friendly. "Consider this a truce for tonight for old time's sake." Before Ethan could respond, Cassandra returned to the table, her gaze shifting between the two men. "I see you two are getting to know each other," she said brightly. "Oh, we know exactly where we stand," Damian replied with a smirk. "Yeah," Ethan added, keeping his tone neutral. Cassandra, however, could sense the tension crackling between them like a live wire. She wondered uneasily if Damian had let something slip about their affair. If Ethan found out about her infidelity, especially given what his previous wives had done, it would destroy everything. The three of them ate their meals in near silence, with Damian and Ethan trading intense, measured glances across the table. Cassandra sat beside her husband, trying to act normal, but the atmosphere was suffocating. She could feel the weight of their unspoken animosity and silently worried what would happen when it all came to a head. The tension between Ethan Cooper and Damian Vaughn lingered like a storm cloud throughout the meal and the long-winded speeches that followed. When the obligatory formalities concluded, Cassandra pulled Ethan onto the dance floor, her fingers tightly gripping his hand. Normally, Ethan cherished the feel of her body close to his, but tonight was different. His eyes kept darting to Damian, who stood watching them from across the room, his gaze as unyielding as steel. "What's going on, Ethan?" Cassandra asked softly as they swayed to the music. "You're so tense, like a spring about to snap. Talk to me." Ethan leaned closer, his voice low. "How well do you know Damian?" Cassandra blinked, taken aback by the question. "We've been working together on some cases." "Why?" "You didn't answer me." "How well do you really know him?" Her brow furrowed. "What are you trying to say? What does this mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," he said, his eyes piercing hers. "Have you slept with him?" She froze, shock rippling through her features. Of course not. How could you even ask me that? Ethan's voice sharpened, cutting through the music. Let me rephrase. Have you had intimacy with him? The slight flinch in her body was all the confirmation Ethan needed. He sighed heavily, his tone steely. I see. How long has it been going on? Cassandra's voice wavered, her eyes welling with tears. It doesn't mean anything, she said. I swear it doesn't. It means everything to me, Cassandra. You know what I've been through. You know my history with infidelity. I won't tolerate it. Now tell me, what do you even know about this man you've been betraying me with? Not much, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. He came to the firm about 6 months ago. He's supposedly done contract work for some federal agency. Ethan's jaw tightened as he processed her words. He's dangerous, and if you want any kind of future with me, you'll end it with him immediately. No excuses. Cassandra stared at him, unsure whether to feel anger or fear. Is that a threat? She asked quietly. No, Ethan de Blaid coldly. It's a warning, and you'd better heed it. If you don't, things won't end well. Not for him, not for us, and not for you. You're scaring me, Ethan, she whispered. Good, he said without hesitation. Her voice trembled. What aren't you telling me? What's really going on? I can't tell you, Ethan said flatly. You're just going to have to trust me. Now, how long has this been going on? Cassandra wiped a tear from her cheek. A couple of months, maybe. A couple of months, Ethan repeated, his tone laced with bitterness. I see. Are you in love with him? No, I only love you, she said earnestly. Ethan's lips curled into a grim smile. You got a funny way of showing it. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking. I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. Don't give me that, Ethan said, his calmness making her flinch. You could have said no, but you didn't. Please, Ethan, she pleaded. I love you. I don't want to lose you. Then prove it, Ethan replied. You're going to tell him it's over. Right here. Right now. In front of me. Cassandra swallowed hard, her voice trembling. If that's what it takes, okay. Ethan guided her back to the table, where Damien was already watching them approach. His smirk widened as they neared. My wife has something she'd like to say to you, Ethan announced, his voice like ice. Damien's gaze shifted to Cassandra, who looked pale and nervous. Mike, we can't see each other anymore. I'm a married woman, and I want to stay that way. Damien nodded, his expression unreadable. I see, he said casually. His gaze flicked back to Ethan. Well, I guess the better man won again, he added, extending his hand toward Ethan. Ethan didn't move. His eyes bore into Damien as he ignored the offered handshake. Come on, he said, steering Cassandra toward the exit. Are we leaving already? She asked, her voice thin with uncertainty. Yes, Ethan replied curtly. When they reached the car, Ethan startled Cassandra by conducting a thorough inspection, checking the trunk, the hood, and beneath the vehicle for anything out of place. Satisfied, he finally got into the driver's seat. What was that about? Cassandra asked, her voice tinged with both fear and confusion. You can never be too careful, Ethan said, his tone clipped. The ride home was suffocatingly silent. Ethan's jaw was set, his expression stormy, while Cassandra wrung her hands in her lap, terrified of what might come next. She silently prayed that her performance at the party had been convincing enough for Ethan to let the matter drop. But as she glanced at him, she felt a chill run down her spine. In that moment, Ethan looked like a man she didn't recognize, a man with the cold, calculating face of death itself. Are we okay? She finally asked, her voice small and trembling. That's up to you, Ethan said darkly. As long as you stay away from Damien, yes. In fact, I think you should resign. Find another place to work. I can't do that, Cassandra replied, her voice rising with panic. I'm working on highly sensitive projects. If I succeed, I might even get a partner at the firm, Cassandra said, her voice defensive. Do you understand how much this opportunity means to me? Ethan stared at her, his expression cold. So, what you're telling me is that your job is more important than our marriage? No, of course not, Cassandra replied quickly. It's just, I'm at a critical point in my career, and I can't afford to screw this up right now. Ethan's eyes darkened. You've already screwed up our marriage. My gut's telling me to kick you to the curb, and I still might. But hear this. If I find out you're still screwing around with Damien, we're done. Understand? She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I understand. But now you need to answer me, Ethan continued. What do you actually know about him? I told you, Cassandra said hesitantly. Not much. He came to the firm 6 months ago and supposedly did contract work for a federal agency. Why? What's going on between you two? Ethan leaned back, his tone icy. Let's just say we've crossed paths before. Leave it at that. Cassandra nodded, but she wasn't satisfied. The next day, she resolved to confront Damien herself. Ethan, meanwhile, decided to take matters into his own hands. If there was a chance of patching things up with Cassandra, it would be under a strict trust but verify policy. The first chance he got, Ethan called an old friend, Alex Garrett, a man he trusted implicitly. Alex wasn't a firearms expert like most of Ethan's former comrades, but he was the best reconnaissance and surveillance man Ethan had ever worked with. Alex's sharp mind and uncanny ability to assess situations had saved Ethan's life more than once. When Ethan explained the situation, Alex's voice was incredulous. Damien Vaughn? Alive? And he's screwing your wife? That son of a... What do you need from me? Everything, Ethan said. Surveillance, audio, video, the works. How much do you want for it? Ethan, come on. You've saved my ass too many times to count. Consider this a favor. I appreciate that, Ethan replied. But let me at least cover your expenses. Fine. Buy me a beer when it's done, Alex said. Consider it handled. A week later, Alex delivered. Ethan sat at his kitchen table, a thick manila envelope in his hands. Inside were damning photos and a USB drive containing several high-definition videos. The evidence left no doubt about Cassandra's betrayal. At 6:30 p.m. that Friday, Cassandra walked through the door, her cheerful greeting faltering as she saw Ethan at the table. In front of him lay the envelope and his .45 caliber pistol. She froze. What's going on? Sit down, Ethan said in a calm, neutral tone. She hesitated. Ethan, I said sit down. He thundered, his voice cutting like a blade. Cassandra flinched and obeyed, pulling out a chair. She lowered herself into it, her hands trembling. So, Ethan said, leaning forward, you've been caught. Do I need to show you the pictures? Or would you prefer I play the videos? Her eyes widened in shock. You have video? Oh, yes. In glorious high definition, Ethan replied coldly. You've missed your calling, Cassandra. You could have been a porn star. But you know what's worse than watching you screw that piece of trash? Cassandra's voice was barely audible. No, Ethan. What? Hearing the two of you disrespect me, Ethan growled. Hearing the things you said about me while you were in my house. That's what broke me. Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. I never meant to hurt you, Ethan. I swear I didn't. Spare me the crocodile tears. Ethan interrupted, his voice cold as ice. You made a promise to me, Cassandra. You swore you'd never betray me. And then you did. Tell me, have I ever been a bad husband? Have I ever abused you? Treated you poorly? Answer me. Cassandra looked up at him, defiance flickering in her eyes. You think you're the perfect man, Ethan? You're not. I know about your past. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Oh, really? What do you think you know? Everything, Cassandra said, her voice shaking. They called you Ethan, the heartless Thompson gunner. How many people have you killed, Ethan? How many lives have you destroyed as a mercenary? Don't think for a second that won't come out in the divorce. And I also know you're wanted in several countries. Ethan chuckled darkly. If you knew half as much as you think you do, Cassandra, you'd realize how badly you've underestimated me. First of all, it's headless, not heartless. Second, I've done nothing illegal in the U.S., and the governments in those other countries don't even exist anymore. As for extradition, good luck with that. Cassandra's lips twisted into a bitter smile. Maybe, but I bet the IRS would love to hear about your offshore accounts. Ethan smirked, his demeanor calm, yet menacing. The IRS? Cassandra, do you honestly think you scare me? You have no idea what you've unleashed. Cassandra said, her voice trembling with accusation. You know, the ones where all your money is stashed. The money you haven't paid a dime of taxes on. Ethan chuckled. the sound low and ominous. If you'd bothered to dig deeper, you'd know those accounts were set up by your lover a long time ago. And they've been empty for years. Her face went pale as Ethan leaned forward. That's right, Cassandra. Damien is the one who recruited me into the business in the first place. Oh, he didn't tell you that, did he? I'll bet he also failed to mention that he was right beside me, knee-deep in blood and carnage for years. And I guarantee he left out the part where he took a contract to kill me. That can't be true, she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. Oh, but it is, Ethan said with a grim smile. He came damn close to succeeding, too. I stopped him barely. I nearly killed him, but he managed to escape. I didn't see or hear from him again until that party. Imagine my surprise when he showed up, grinning like nothing had ever happened. I don't believe you, Cassandra said weakly. Ethan's tone turned sharp. Didn't you notice the scar on his inner thigh? I gave him that scar when I shot him. I was aiming for his balls, but he dodged just in time. Still, I'll bet it hurt like hell. Cassandra's hands trembled as Ethan continued. Oh, and did he mention that he still plans to kill me? Because I've got it all on video, including your little response. Her voice cracked. So, what are you going to do? Ethan's eyes narrowed. Are you still planning on going with him on that little cruise? You know, the one you told me was a client meeting out of town. Her lips parted in shock. You know about that? I've known for weeks, Ethan said, his voice a cold blade. I even packed your suitcase for you. But don't worry. Damien doesn't know that Alex will be joining your cruise to keep me updated. Cassandra swallowed hard. He's coming here to pick me up tonight. Ethan shook his head slowly, his eyes like ice. No, he's not. If that man sets foot in this house, I'll kill you both where you stand. And I'll make it look like self-defense. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. Ethan's hand moved to his pistol, his voice a quiet thunder. You really want to test me? Go ahead. Her courage faltered, and she reached for her phone. Ethan's command stopped her. Put it on speaker. Cassandra obeyed, dialing the number with trembling fingers. Damien's voice came through the line, smooth and confident. Hey, baby, you ready for me to pick you up? No, sweetie, Cassandra said nervously. I'll come to your place. We'll go from there. Damien's tone hardened. Come on, Cass. We planned it this way. She's coming to you, Ethan roared. And if either of you comes near me or my house again, so help me God, I'll blow your brains out. Damien's voice wavered. All right. Calm down. Ethan's voice was steady as steel. I mean it, Damien. If you value your life, stay away. Both of you. Forever. Cassandra's voice was barely a whisper. He's serious, Damien. Fine, Damien said quickly. I get it. I'll stay away. Ethan snatched the phone from Cassandra and ended the call. Tossing it back to her, he pointed toward the door. Get out. Cassandra hesitated, stepping toward him as if to touch his face. Ethan recoiled, his expression one of disgust. Stay away from me, he warned. You've lost that right. Just take your stuff and leave. Tears streamed down her face as she moved toward her suitcase. She paused in the doorway, looking back at him. I'm sorry, Ethan. Yeah, you are, he replied coldly. And just so you know, once Damien's done with you, he'll turn on you the way he did me. Believe me, he won't think twice about killing you. Her voice cracked. Don't you love me anymore? Ethan's expression was unreadable. I did. Once. I even gave you a second chance. Something I almost never do. But then you threw it all away. You destroyed what little trust one had left. Cassandra sobbed quietly. I'll regret this for the rest of my life. You should, Ethan said, his voice devoid of emotion. But I won't be there to pick up the pieces when Damien breaks you. Goodbye, Cassandra. Without another word, she walked out the door, leaving Ethan alone in the silence of their shattered home. Traitor, Ethan muttered coldly as he stared at Cassandra. That's what you are? I don't associate with traitors. Now get out. Cassandra nodded meekly, tears streaming down her face as she turned and walked out the door. About half an hour later, she called Ethan to inform him she was at Damien's condo. Another 30 minutes passed, and she called again, this time to let him know they were at the airport. Goodbye, wife, Ethan said with venom. Enjoy what's left of your worthless life. What does that mean? Cassandra asked nervously. You know the old saying about lying down with dogs, Ethan replied. Just remember what I said. He ended the call and immediately dialed Alex. They're at the airport, Ethan informed him. Got it, Alex replied. I'll be in touch. Over the next day, Ethan received periodic updates from Alex. From the sound of things, Cassandra and Damien were thoroughly enjoying their luxurious cruise. Ethan's anger simmered, but he let it stay buried. On the second day of their cruise, Ethan was nursing a drink at a local bar, half-heartedly watching a game on the TV. The bartender and a few patrons tried to strike up a conversation, but Ethan's icy demeanor quickly discouraged them. An hour into his solitude, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was Alex. What's up? Ethan asked. Boss, Alex said, his tone grim. Your wife's in danger. Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. What's going on? Just like you predicted. Damien's talking with some guerrillas. He's taking her to an island, and I'm following in another boat. He's planning to hand her over to them as a sex slave. Do you know where they're headed? Ethan demanded. There are only about 700 islands in the Bahamas, Alex replied. But Damien let it slip. I've got the location. When's the handoff supposed to happen? Ethan asked, already calculating his next steps. In about 12 hours, Alex said. You've got just enough time to get here if you want to extract her. Ethan's jaw clenched. He hated what Cassandra had done, but there was no way he could let her fall into such a horrific fate, or worse, die. Text me the coordinates and arrange transport, Ethan ordered. Already done, boss. Details are on their way. Thanks, Alex. I owe you, Ethan said, ending the call. He downed the rest of his drink, paid his tab, and headed home. At home, Ethan went straight to the attic, unlocking a large chest that held his gear. His Thompson submachine gun lay inside, gleaming under the soft light. He picked it up, inspecting it carefully. It was still clean and oiled, ready for action. Ethan loaded a drum magazine and a backup large magazine, figuring 130 rounds would suffice. If not, he was sure there'd be weapons lying around at the site. He packed the rest of his gear, dressed for combat, and headed to a small airstrip where a Learjet was waiting. He handed an envelope of cash to the pilot and gave him the coordinates. Minutes later, they were airborne. Ethan reviewed the map Alex had sent, studying the small, mostly uninhabited island and noting its features. There was a landing strip, likely used by smugglers, and a clearing that matched Alex's description. Ethan planned his approach meticulously as the plane sped toward its destination. In the plane's lavatory, Ethan applied camouflage paint and donned his combat gear. He stared at himself in the mirror, mentally preparing for the bloodshed ahead. Double-checking his weapons, he returned to his seat. As the jet descended, the island came into view, illuminated by a faint campfire in the distance. The plane touched down on the dirt strip, and Ethan disembarked, his Thompson slung over his shoulder. Alex was waiting for him. This way, Alex whispered, leading Ethan through thick vegetation to avoid detection. They moved quietly, ensuring the ammunition drum didn't rattle. Within 10 minutes, they reached the edge of the camp. Ethan surveyed the scene. Cassandra was naked and tied to the ground, her arms and legs spread wide. Tears streamed down her face as she begged Damien to let her go. Please, Mike, she sobbed. Don't do this. Don't I mean anything to you? Damien laughed. Yeah, you mean about $250,000. Once the boss gets here, we'll make the exchange, and you'll be off to your new life. Nothing your pathetic husband can do about it. The guerrillas chuckled. One of them stood over Cassandra, unzipping his pants. Put that away, Damien snapped. The boss wants her fresh, you idiot. Ethan glanced at Alex, who was already gripping his .45 caliber pistol. A quick check of his watch confirmed it was time. Ethan signaled Alex to stay behind him as he moved into position. Flicking the switches on his Thompson to automatic mode, Ethan pulled back the charging handle. The distinct clack of the weapon caught the attention of the guerrillas, but before they could react, Ethan opened fire. Controlled bursts of .45 caliber rounds mowed them down, sending two sprawling and silencing the others in seconds. One guerrilla managed to fire back, but the shot went wide. Ethan shifted his aim to Damien, who was frozen in shock. A quick 3-round burst tore through Damien's head, killing him instantly. The entire skirmish was over in moments. Ethan's eyes flicked to Cassandra. Blood was pooling under her side, one of the gorilla's stray bullets having hit her. Alex knelt by her side, checking for a pulse. Cassandra looked up at Ethan, her eyes glassy with pain and regret. "I'm sorry," she wheezed. Ethan stared at her coldly, unmoved as her eyes glazed over. Alex shook his head. "She's gone, boss." Ethan spat on the ground. "Leave her," he said flatly. "Al Capitan's expecting a blunda." Let's not disappoint him. Alex looked at Ethan, stunned. "Damn, you're cold-blooded." "You know it," Ethan replied. "Now help me stoke that fire." The two dragged Cassandra's lifeless body to the fire alongside Damien and the gorillas. Ethan tossed a wad of cash into the flames as a grim farewell. "Let's clean up," Ethan ordered. He and Alex collected the brass casings and headed back to the plane. Once airborne, Ethan sat in the cabin, sipping a beer and smoking a cigar. Alex joined him after a while. "What's next?" Alex asked. Ethan exhaled a puff of smoke. "Not sure," he replied. "But one thing's for certain. I warned her. She just didn't listen. Decided to betray me." Ethan muttered as he stared at the empty doorway where Cassandra had just left. "I don't deal with traitors. And that's what you are. Now go." 30 minutes later, his phone buzzed. Cassandra informed him she was at Damien's condo. Another half-hour passed, and she called again to say they were at the airport. "Goodbye, wife," Ethan said coldly. "Enjoy what's left of your worthless life." "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You know the saying about lying down with dogs," Ethan replied. "Just remember what I said." He ended the call and immediately rang Alex. "They're at the airport," Ethan informed him. "Got it," Alex said. "I'll keep you posted." Over the next few days, Alex sent Ethan regular updates. Cassandra and Damien appeared to be enjoying their lavish cruise, oblivious to what lay ahead. Ethan stayed busy, going through the motions of his life while keeping his emotions tightly leashed. On the second day of their cruise, Ethan found himself at a local bar, half listening to a game on the television as he nursed his drink. He wasn't in the mood for company, and the bartender quickly got the hint. An hour later, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was Alex. "Boss," Alex said without preamble, "your wife's in danger." Ethan's body tensed. "Explain." "Just like you thought. Damien's cutting her loose. He's handed her over to some gorillas on a small island. They're planning to sell her as a slave." "Coordinates?" Ethan barked. "Already sent," Alex said. "But you'll need to hurry." Ethan moved quickly, his focus razor-sharp. He retrieved his gear, prepared himself, and met Alex on the island. What followed was a swift and brutal takedown of Damien, the gorillas, and their operation. When the dust settled, Cassandra was dead, and Ethan made no effort to grieve. Her betrayal had sealed her fate long before that night. Weeks passed, and Ethan returned to his life, crafting a careful alibi for Cassandra's disappearance. He filed a missing persons report when her absence from the cruise ship was noted and played the grieving husband to perfection. Even when officers from the firm questioned him, Ethan managed to deflect their inquiries, adding a few barbed remarks about Cassandra's affair with Damien. 1 year later, Ethan filed for divorce on grounds of abandonment. 60 days later, it was finalized, and he was a free man. Though still stung by her actions, Ethan vowed never to allow himself to be so vulnerable again. It was a week before Christmas when 2 men in dark suits knocked on his door. Ethan peered through the peephole before opening it. "Ethan Cooper?" the taller of the two asked, holding up credentials. "Special Agent Smith. This is Agent Jones. FBI. Come in," Ethan said, stepping aside. "Can I offer you something to drink?" "No, thank you," Smith said, taking a seat in Ethan's recliner. "We just have a few questions." "What can I do for you?" Ethan asked, leaning against the armrest of the couch. "Have you ever been to the Bahamas?" Smith asked. Ethan shook his head. "No." "Why? What about your wife?" "Ex-wife," Ethan corrected. "She left me over a year ago with her lover. I've no idea where they went." "That would be one Damien Vaughn?" "Yes." Smith's expression didn't change. "We received a tip from the Bahamian authorities. They found the remains of your ex-wife and Mr. Vaughn on one of their islands." "I see. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Smith asked. No, Ethan de Blade. Why? Just wrapping up loose ends, Smith said casually. Vaughn's been on our radar for a while. Human trafficking, among other things. Seems he had a falling out with some business associates. Disagreement over what? Ethan asked. And what does Cassandra have to do with it? Please, Mr. Cooper, don't insult our intelligence, Smith said with a faint smirk. You're a bit of a legend, you know. We've heard the stories about you and that Thompson gun of yours. Ethan's face remained impassive. You don't think I had anything to do with it? Smith shrugged. The rounds that killed your ex-wife came from a 9mm. The others, .45 caliber. A common round. Besides, the brass was policed from the scene, and none of the victims were decapitated. That's not your style. I see. Smith leaned back in the recliner. Just making sure you're not back in business. No, Ethan said firmly. Not back in that business. Good, Smith said, standing. Merry Christmas, Mr. Cooper. That evening, Ethan met Alex for a beer at a local bar. They sat in comfortable silence until the jukebox began playing a familiar tune. Ethan sighed as the lyrics reached his ears. Ethan was a warrior, from the land of the midnight sun. Alex laughed. Merry Christmas, boss. Ethan smirked and raised his beer. Merry Christmas, Alex. Across the bar, two men in suits raised their glasses. Agent Smith grinned as Ethan met his gaze and flipped him off. Smith laughed, taking a sip of his beer. Later that night, Ethan noticed a young waitress, Maria, stealing glances at him. When Alex left, Ethan motioned her over. Merry Christmas to me, he muttered, watching her approach.